Hello. Welcome to This Week in Politics. Well, another eventful day, another eventful week. We started the week with Charlottesville, and we ended the week with Bannon. And frankly, I thought about coming on earlier in the week to talk about the Charlottesville thing, but experience has told me that usually the people that talk early and often and loud usually don't have all the information, and they usually end up saying wrong things. And Charlottesville um, was no exception. Now, when it started, everybody said that a car ran into people and things got violent. I don't believe that's what happened at all. Now, let's back up and take a look at what the press is trying to tell us, and let's look at the facts. The press is trying to tell us that the alt-left, which is Black Lives Matters, the Wall Street group, all the Soros thugs, was victimized by the alt-right, the skinheads, the neo-Nazis, and all of that. When Trump came out and said that he disliked violence on both sides, the press went crazy. And you had to ask yourself, why did they go crazy? That doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, common sense would tell you and I that violence is violence. It doesn't matter if it's on the right, alt-right, or alt-left. To badmouth violence on both sides was the right thing to do. I think President Trump did a wonderful job, especially in his Tuesday press conference. I thought he did an awesome job. I thought he talked to the program well. I thought he handled the press extremely well. And I must say that it's nice to have a president that is willing to fight back against these left-wing press types. And he did a beautiful job of that. If you watch that press conference from beginning to end, the press had venom. They were spewing venom at him the whole time, and he handled it beautifully. They didn't trip him up, and he said exactly what he meant, which upset him. So you had to ask yourself, well, why did the press get so upset? Well, after looking into it over the period of a week, other facts came out that most of us didn't know at the time. As an example, the alt-right, which was the neo-Nazis and the skinheads, they had permits to protest the taking down of the monuments or statues. They had a permit to be there. The alt-left didn't. The alt-right was organized. The alt-left was also organized. But here's the difference. The alt-left, first off, did not have a legal leg to stand on. Secondly, they showed up not with signs, but with baseball bats and clubs. They were there to fight and do damage. The alt-right was not. They were there to protest. So you have to ask yourself, well, why did the alt-left come there with no permit, no legal standing to be there, and come with weapons to fight? And the answer is obvious. They were paid to. People don't just get organized like that on the spur of the moment with body armor and masks and weapons and come there all at the same time to meet at a specific place on accident. That was organized. And the only way that they were that organized and that well equipped, i.e. tiki torches, was they were paid and they were supplied. So now you have to ask, well, who paid them? Well, to figure that out, let's back up a minute. We know for a fact that the cops were told to stand down and not interfere. Okay? Why? Well, let's think about what state this was held in. It was held in Virginia. And who is the mayor of Virginia? Terry McAuliffe. Now, how does Terry McAuliffe figure into this? He's basically the top dog that could tell the state police to stand down, which they were told. We know that. So if Terry McAuliffe told him to stand down, well, who is Terry McAuliffe other than the governor of Virginia? He's the ex-cabinet member or the ex-campaign manager for Bill Clinton. He's associated with the Clinton Foundation, the pay for play. The Clinton Foundation and the Clinton campaign, one of their major contributors was George Soros. Now, we know that George Soros is also the one that supplied the Wall Street gang. He also funded the Black Lives Matter. So we know that he pays people to protest. He is trying to stir discontent and violence in this country to overthrow our government. That's what his goal is. So if George Soros picked up the phone and told Terry McAuliffe to have the police stand down, he's going to have something happen, Terry McAuliffe would do that. So let's think about that. Now, why would Terry McAuliffe do that? Why would he want violence in his own state? Well, they didn't count on Trump's response. They were planning on pegging this all on the skinheads and the neo-Nazis and turning this into a racial thing, because that's where they're going. That was Obama's job while he was in office, and he did a great job of dividing this country between the haves and have-nots, between blacks and whites, and he did a wonderful job of that. So now that Obama is out of office, now Soros is going another way. They thought they were going to get 4 to 8 more years with Clinton in there to sow more discontent. When she lost, now Soros has to go on his own. So now he's pulling strings in different states where he curries favor to have and sow discontent. And Virginia is a logical choice. He controls the Clinton Foundation and funding, and Terry McAuliffe. What they didn't count on was Trump stepping in and calling out the alt-left, and the press was complicit in this. The press, even after Trump said that, the press is so intent on getting rid of Trump, they're willing to sacrifice our country. They're willing to sacrifice our freedom to get rid of Trump. So the press is complicit. So when Trump called the left and the right out, the press went crazy, because now they can't pin it all on the alt-right, because the president has called them out and said, you're both wrong and you're both complicit. What Trump didn't say is the left came in and attacked the right, which is exactly what happened. If you look at the video, there's no question at all of who started it. The left started it. They came to fight. They came to hurt and maim and kill. And the police stood down. This is about a continued effort to overthrow our government and to create a coup d'etat to make Trump and his administration fall. This is not about statues. This is not about the left and right. This is not about black and white. This is not about racial divide. This is about chaos. This is about the left trying to control events to get rid of Trump. That's what this is all about. The left is totally bending themselves in all types of contortions to pin anything they can on Trump to get him to resign, to get him to quit, and to bring articles of impeachment against him. And they just can't make it go. So if we extrapolate from current events, it's pretty safe to say that we're going to have more racial divide, probably in Democratic states or in states where Soros curries favor. You know, if I had to guess, I'd say either in Florida, New York, California, Washington, Oregon, or Illinois. If I had to guess, the next racial event that happens is going to be in one of those states. And it'll be organized, and Soros will be behind it, and the press will try to pin it all on the alt-right. These are not about political left and political right. That's not what is going on here. This is about pitting one hate group against another. Look at it this way. Instead of the alt-left being Black Lives Matters and the Wall Street group, picture them as communists, okay? And the alt-right, instead of picturing them as skinheads and neo-Nazis, picture them as socialists. The socialists and the communists have been fighting for a long time. Remember Germany against Russia. They are fighting an ideological fight. Soros is just capitalizing on that. He has incited these around the world. In the Ukraine, as an example. So this is nothing new. This is right out of the Soros game plan. This is the first time it's been done in this country. So now the question becomes, for us as Americans, for us as the sheeple, if you will, are we going to allow these people to manipulate us? Are we going to continue to allow the cops to stand down when there's violence? Are we going to continue to allow the left-wing press to do everything they can, 24/7, wall-to-wall coverage on overthrowing our government and overthrowing our duly elected president? Because that's what they're doing. This is just the most current event. These were paid rioters. Now, I know this is going to sound petty, but the press is doing something here I want you to think about. They are calling these people protesters, okay? A protest is where you can legally go out to a designated area and carry a sign and give speeches and yell slogans and do those. That's a protest. A riot is where you go to a place illegally, without a permit, with weapons, with the intent to cause chaos and violence. These people were not protesters. Now, let me back up. The alt-right, who the press is trying to demonize, by the way, they were protesters. The alt-left, they're rioters. Now, am I saying that because I'm a right-winger? No. Go look at the video. Look at who started it. Go to the city records and see who had permits to be there and who didn't. That's why he who speaks first usually speaks worst. He who speaks last usually speaks best. Because now we know the facts. Just like Trump said in his Tuesday speech. He said, I know the facts, you don't. And he's right. So what's the story here? If the story is not about statues, and it's not about the fighting, as I said, the real story here, or the motive here, is chaos. The real story here to pay attention to is how the press is treating this story. They are trying to paint two different sides of the same bird with a different brush. They want to make the left look like victims, like Black Lives Matter is getting the crap beat out of them, and the neo-Nazis are the guilty ones. That's what they're trying to do. When in reality, we know what happened. The exact opposite is the different, and the press knows this. But they are attempting to, anything that happens, they are trying to pin it all on the alt-right. So now you have to ask yourself, well, why would they do that? Because this is the way the press operates. Once they pigeonhole you and continue to call you a name for a long time, it just becomes normal, like Obamacare. You know, once that's stuck, everybody knows what Obamacare is, and everybody can have their opinion of Obamacare. 8 years ago, that was not even a term. They're doing the same thing with the alt-right. Eventually, once they get it pinned in everybody's mind that the alt-right is bad, they're evil, they're violent, they're neo-Nazis, they're skinheads, once they get that into your head and they continue to use the term alt-right, they will eventually just drop the alt and it'll just be the right. So now, when that happens, everybody on the political right of center will be evil, will be bad, will be violent, will be racist, homophobes. That's what the press is doing. That's their contribution to overthrowing our government. So make no mistake about this. This is not about statues. They've been there 150 years and nobody's cared. Soros picked this as a dividing line, and he did it in Virginia, which is one of the home states of the Confederacy and the Union. One of the biggest battle states in the whole Union was in Virginia. Some of the best leaders in our country came from Virginia. There's a reason for Virginia being picked. And he picked statues because it's right there on the line. They're using race baiting, which Obama did. They're continuing to use race baiting to create instability, to instill bad feelings between Americans, so that we will jump on their train. When they tell us to jump on, we will jump on to overthrow the bad right. You know, Trump is right on the right of government. Okay, he's not a complete right winger, but he's definitely right of center. So when they tell us that we got to get rid of the right, that means Trump. When they're trying to paint the alt-right as the right, they're painting Trump. That's the end goal here. They want to get rid of the right, all of us. Anybody that is right of center, they're trying to get rid of. That's what this is about. That's why they're using paid thugs. That's why they picked Virginia. That's why the press is playing this the way they have done it. That's why they picked Virginia, because Terry McAuliffe is there. That's why the police were told to stand down. And that's why the press is trying to paint the whole right with the same brush that they are attempting to paint the alt-right right now. And Trump did a beautiful job of pinning equal blame on both sides. It really, the majority of the blame belongs on the left, but he tried to keep an equal hand on it. And when they called him on it, he walked right up to saying the left started it without actually saying it. I thought he did a great job. One of the best press conferences by an American president I've seen in my lifetime. And I saw Ronald Reagan handles the press like a whipped puppy. And I think Trump did a better job than Reagan did. Okay. The next item I want to talk about is it's been a little item in the news. It's been kind of overlooked because of the whole Charlottesville thing. But I want to talk about Venezuela. Now, I did a show on the Right Wing Reverend. I did a show about appealing to the millennials, because the millennials is the primary crowd that supported Bernie. And there was an article in the Wall Street Journal saying that fully 1/3 of the millennials half dislike capitalism and a full third endorsed socialism. So I did a whole program dissecting that and why they believe that, and it's understandable why. And I tried to give them an example, because if you put yourself in the eyes of the millennials, they've never seen socialism fall. Those of us that remember Reagan, we remember the fall of the Berlin Wall. We remember the USSR breaking up. We remember seeing all the things that socialism did to its people. Okay? They don't. And the press is not playing Venezuela. Now, Venezuela used to be a democracy. When Chavez took it over, he turned it socialist. He nationalized the oil companies, and that's one of their biggest exports. Now, in the beginning, everybody was happy. They all loved Chavez, okay? Because he had a lot of money, because he nationalized the businesses. The economy was going great because he had lots of money, but then he started spending like socialists do and trying to take over things and do things. And eventually what happens in socialism is there's a few fat cats at the top and everybody else goes broke. That's just the way that it always works. There's never been a successful socialist government anywhere, anytime, any place on this planet forever. Venezuela is the most current one. Venezuela has reneged on loan payments. Venezuela is rioting in the streets. There is no food on the shelves in the supermarkets. There is no gasoline to run their cars in Venezuela. There's no money. Their inflation in Venezuela is incalculable. When we were in school, we had pictures of people carrying wheelbarrows full of money to the store to buy a loaf of bread because the currency was worthless. That's what's going on in Venezuela. So you may as well not have a currency. Their exports are going down because the price of oil is down. So they don't have as much money coming in. They still have all the obligations, and they're reneging on their international obligations. They're relying on Cuba and Russia is in no position to help anybody right now at all. Russia's got enough of their own problems. Now, the U.S. is talking about sanctioning Venezuela. If that happens, they're done. They're just completely done. They have not gone there yet, but they are talking about it. As much as I'd like to see them go, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's like Obamacare. It's going to implode. Socialist ideas and socialist experiments always implode, and they will implode down there. That dictator down there will be thrown over, and they will bring in a right wing at some point, and they'll right the ship. But that's going to take a lot of time. But the reason I mentioned Venezuela is I want our young people to pay attention to it. Search out articles on the internet about Venezuela and their form of government and see what's happening down there, because this is a prime example of what socialism looks like. When socialism takes over, the government uses force. Now, the only reason socialism hasn't taken over here yet is mainly because we have guns. And we as Americans are not afraid to use our guns if somebody comes to collect them. But in these socialist countries, you know, it's no coincidence that every time there's violence, they call for guns to be gun control. That's what the socialists love to yell about, gun control. And I've used this many, many times, and I'll use it here again. In this country, there are 4 cities that have the 4 toughest gun control laws in the country. 4 cities: Washington, D.C., Chicago, L.A., and Baton Rouge. Guess which 4 cities have the highest murder rate? Washington, D.C., Chicago, L.A., Baton Rouge. That's not a coincidence. I mean, think about it. If you're a crook, okay, if you're a gangster, and you want to go kill a gang member, are you more likely to kill him if he has a gun or if he doesn't have a gun? If he doesn't have a gun. If you know that the other person doesn't have a gun, you're going to do whatever it is you feel like. If there's a possibility they've got a gun and they may shoot back, you're going to be a little bit more timid, which is what the rest of the country is. And the funny thing is, in Chicago, Rahm Emanuel right now is calling for stricter gun control. They've got the strictest policy in the country, and he's asking for more. It's silliness, but that's what socialists do. The Venezuelans can't fight back because they don't have guns. They're rioting in the streets, they're throwing rocks at the police, but they don't have guns. If they had guns, that fight would be completely different down there. But the governments use force to enforce their way. Venezuela is in the midst of a catastrophe, and it's all because of the form of government, socialism. Now, the press is not playing this up. They're not reporting on it every day like they are Charlottesville. And there's a reason for that. They do not want the American people to see the evils of socialism. They want us to see only the good parts of socialism because that's where they want to take us. For the millennials, they are being led like sheep because they don't know the difference and the press is not showing them. So I encourage you, if you are a millennial, go do your research on Venezuela. Check out the history for the last 25 years. See where they came from and where they are now. Check out the type of government. Now, the third thing I want to talk about is Bannon. Now, it really, the whole Bannon thing, it depends on who you talk to. The press wants us to believe that by Bannon being fired, Trump is now completely isolated from the right, which should make them happy, right? The right wants us to believe that with Bannon gone, Trump is going to be leaning more left. And it is true that the only advisors he's got left are Democrats. McMaster's is a Democrat. Machine Gun Kelly is a Democrat. So this is not idle chit chat. The left wants us to believe that Bannon was the complete architect of the Trump victory, you know, because they can't accept the fact that Hillary lost. So it had to be I think Trump couldn't possibly be smart enough to win. So he had to have somebody masterminded, and it had to be Bannon, which is why they pushed so hard to get Bannon out of there. None of that's true, of course. Bannon jumped on the bandwagon late in the game. Now, yes, he was head of Breitbart. Yes, he is a right winger. Yes, he is vocal. And yes, he had the president's ear. But the fact that he's gone is not going to change who Donald Trump is. It's going to change the voices that he hears, for sure. But it's not going to change who Trump is. I don't believe Trump will lean anymore to the left. I think I think Trump made a mistake here, not because of right-left ideology within the White House, but he believes that by getting rid of Bannon, he's throwing the left a bone. Never works that way. I've seen it tried over and over and over again. By throwing a bone to the establishment, all that does is prove that you're weak. And I think Trump lost this round. Now the press may back off for a while, and the light may shine more on Bannon than it does on Charlottesville and his supposed mishandling of that. And that may be the only bone he was looking for. I don't know. Am I concerned about Bannon being fired? I am, but not because of Bannon. And here's why. About 2 years ago, I did a series of programs on all the candidates for president. And one of the observations I made about Trump, I actually did 2 programs on Trump. And one of the observations I made about Trump is he has no problem throwing people that are loyal to him under the bus. If it suits his needs and his wants, he will throw you under the bus without thinking about it. So you have to ask yourself, well, how does this benefit Trump by throwing Bannon under the bus? Well, in the first place, it buys him 2 days of controlling the narrative. Because now the press, I picked up the Wall Street Journal this morning, and the headline banner said something about Bannon. Not Charlottesville. In fact, there was no article on the front page about Charlottesville. So if all he was trying to do was control the narrative for a couple of days, he did that. But again, I have to question his loyalty to his people. Think of the people that he's gotten rid of in his inner circle just since he's been there. He's only been there 7 or 8 months. And every Republican that he had around him in the White House is gone. Except for Kellyanne, she's still there. The rest are Democrats. You got to ask yourself about the loyalty that he's showing to them. He expects loyalty from his people, but he's not willing to give loyalty back to his peeps. That shows a real lack of character to me, and that really concerns me. That's why I'm concerned about the whole Bannon thing. It has nothing at all to do with who Trump is or what Trump's going to do. So there were some articles I wanted to go over, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'm just going to kind of touch on these. But there was an article in the paper who read, Iran parliament raises military spending. Okay. Again, I did a whole bunch of programs on the stupid Iran nuclear deal that Obama and his administration cobbled together. Now, instead of getting rid of the sanctions that we had on Iran, stair-stepped over the years of the life of the term of the thing, he got rid of them at all. And they were flooded with cash. They went out and bought a whole bunch of airlines and airplanes to modernize their commercial fleet. They went around. I remember they did about 6 months of going around the world spending money left and right. And so now here we are, only 7 or 8 months into the new administration, and Iran is raising their military spending. Where do you think they got the money? From their old pal in the White House. That money that we gave up, or that we gave to them, is now going to be spent financing more violence in the Middle East. First off, They should never have negotiated with Iran in the first place. We have a policy in this country of not negotiating with terrorists. There are 3 countries in the Middle East that are that are designated as terrorist countries. Iran's one of them. So, in my opinion, the United States had no business negotiating with a bunch of terrorists. On that standard alone, that Iran nuclear deal should be null and void. But they negotiated. And it never was passed by the Senate. You need to remember that. But you know who it was okayed by? It was unanimously passed and agreed on in the United Nations. Now, I want you to consider that for a second. There are, last time I counted, 186. There may be a few more now. Heads of countries in the UN. There's Russia, China, Iraq, Egypt, Afghanistan, Turkey, all these despots. And they all agreed to this agreement. And the US, who negotiated the whole thing, never did pass it. You got to ask yourself why. They passed it because they now have control of when we can go in and look in Iran for violations of the contract. Now, remember, we were told by the Obama administration that we could go in anytime we wanted to and check on it. First off, have we gone in yet? No. Are we going to? No. And you know why we're not going to? Because the UN is not going to allow it. Because in order to do that, we have to get the permission of the United Nations. That's why Obama sent it over there before he gave it to the House and Senate. That's why it was passed in the United Nations unanimously, because Obama gave them control over our negotiated contract. Think about that for a second. The United States has given up control of a contract that we negotiated with the foreign country and gave that control to the United Nations. That's what was significant about that agreement. It wasn't the agreement. It wasn't the money. It was about giving control to the United Nations. That's just one more step. They're dribbling piece by piece to take control of this country. They're going to use see, this is all part of the whole Charlottesville thing. This is a whole part of the Soros thing, okay? One part is sowing discontent, getting the Americans ready for an overthrow, trying to get rid of Trump, making race relations an issue, creating violence in the street. And the top of the government is step by step, the establishment, the swamp rats, are giving control over to the United Nations. The United Nations is building a military. They have a military. They're ineffectual, but they do have a military. One of the things Obama did in his administration at some point was he put the United States troops under the authority in, I think it was in Afghanistan, but I'm not positive about that. But in one of the fields where he sent U.S. troops, he put them under the control of the United Nations. Do you think FDR would have done that in World War II? No. We went in over there to help them, and Eisenhower took control. Yes, he brought along an Englishman on his side, but everybody in the world knew Eisenhower ran the show. Obama did just the opposite. He sent the troops, but he gave control to the United Nations. He negotiated a contract, but he gave control to the United Nations. The next step, in my humble opinion, when we know that what I'm telling you is true, is when the United Nations is given the authority to tax international spaces. As an example, anytime you take an international air flight and you go into international airspace, you will pay a tax on your ticket. If you go on a cruise and you go into international waters, there will be a tax on your ticket. If you use wind or solar and you build something out in the ocean, you will pay a tax. When that happens and they're raising quadrillions of dollars around the world, a penny or two at a time for taxes, we're done. We're done. Because on that scenario, I mean, think about every time somebody gets on a plane, every time somebody gets on a ship, every time a ship crosses the ocean, you pay a tax. That money going to the United Nations, who is run by a bunch of thugs, they will dominate. They will take total control and they will walk all over the United States. And by that point in time, we will have ceded most of our control of our country to the United Nations. It's coming, and it's coming very quickly. And because the press controls everything, they're like flashing a shiny ball in our face. Here's Charlottesville. When over here we've got the whole Venezuela, Iran deal happening. But don't watch this. Watch the shiny ball. Okay, that's the game they're playing. And before you know it, we're going to keep watching the shiny ball until there's nothing left for us to watch, because everything will be controlled or given up to the fat cats, and we won't have anything. There is another issue I wanted to talk about, was abortion. It has always been a litmus test for Democrats since the 70s. No, because Obama put the Dixiecrats in the, I'd say since the mid 80s. It's always a litmus test. To be a good Democrat, you had to be pro-abortion. Well, back in the day, they called it pro-choice, but it's basically pro-abortion, pro-death. That was a litmus test. In order to be a Democrat, you had to be pro-death. Okay. Now, it never was a litmus test, though it should have been on the Republican side. You could be a Democrat or you could be a Republican and be pro-choice, and that was not such a big deal. But you could not be a Democrat and be pro-life. So now there's an article, and the Democrats have been getting the snot beat out of them. I mean, with the exception of the presidency in the last 30 years, the Democrats have just been getting the snot beat out of them. So now they're trying to, without upsetting the pro-death lobby, they're trying to say that that's no longer a litmus test. And there was an article on Monday, August 14th, in the Wall Street Journal that says party figures disagree over reaching out to 2018 candidates who oppose the longtime plank. So the Democrats have figured out, hey, we're getting our tails kicked. Maybe we ought to drop the litmus test for being pro-death. Maybe we need to let some pro-lifers in here just so we can win some danged elections. It doesn't do us any good to have, pardon me, 100% of nothing rather than 60% of something. I mean, if they continue to do this, they will end up nothing. Okay, so here's my opinion. My opinion is that the Republican and Democratic Party as we know it is dead. Okay, and they've been dead for a little while. Trump did not kill them. Trump merely showed a light on it. Okay, so I don't think we have Republicans and Democrats anymore. I think we have establishment and Tea Party. The establishment wants to stay in control, and they know that in order to do that, they're going to have to open the doors a little bit on the Democratic side to allow pro-lifers to be Democrats. And it's tearing the party apart, which has been an issue for the Republicans up until probably W. When W was elected, the evangelicals and the Christians and everybody on the right kind of coalesced because the social agenda was so left-wing that we had our stomach full. And we don't want it anymore. We don't want pro-death. We don't want pro-homosexuals. We don't want any of that. And the Republicans have pretty much coalesced around that. That is not the reason that the press wants you to believe that that's the reason that we lost the presidency for 2 times. No, it's a combination of things. The first and foremost was the 2 candidates we had after W were both establishment Republicans. There was no change at all there. And secondly, the person that they ran, the Democrats ran, was, I can't think of the word, but he was a powerful speaker. And he was loved by his base. He had no coattails. The whole time he was in office, they lost people in the House, the Senate, state houses, and governorships around the country. With the recent flip of a Democrat to a Republican in West Virginia, the Republicans now control 35 governorships out of 50 in the country. Think about that. So they are, the Democrats right now are trying to figure out what to do about the abortion issue. My feeling on how that's going to end is you're still going to have to pass a litmus test no matter what verbiage they give. All they're trying to do is suck. They're going to give lip service to whatever it is they think is going to win them elections. They're basically who they are is never going to change. Now, there's one more article I wanted to talk about, one more issue coming up in Alabama. And this is over the seat to take over where Jeff Sessions was at, and his Senate seat from Alabama. Now, there's 2 people running down there. And let me think if I can find their names here. So President Trump has endorsed Luther Strange, the Republican appointed to hold Mr. Sessions' seat temporarily. Mr. Strange is also backed by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and the party establishment. That's the key. That's the key. And that's who we do not want in the office. Now, the other guy, now the way Alabama does it is they've got all these people running. If nobody gets 50%, they have a runoff between the top 2 vote getters. Strange is the one that was appointed to be there. He's backed by Mitch McConnell, and disappointingly so, he was endorsed by Trump. The other one that is expected to come in second, which he did, by the way, was Supreme Court Judge Roy Moore, a favorite of religious conservatives. And here's the key. Because he lost his judicial post for refusing to remove a 10 Commandments monument from a state building. I remember this case. And I jumped up and down, and I was very, very proud of this judge. The district court down there told this judge to get the 10 Commandments off of the public land, and he refused. The district court kicked him off of the bench for disobeying. He lost his a lifetime appointment to the judgeship. He lost over doing the right thing. And God bless him. That's who we want in office. That's a man that is willing to do what's right over what's convenient. It would have been very easy for him to move the 10 Commandments and keep his judgeship for the rest of his life, but he didn't. He said, no, that's wrong. I'm not doing that. And if I lose my job, I lose my job. So he lost his job. Now he wants to run for the Senate. And I say, for everybody in Alabama who's listening, vote for Judge Roy Moore. Do not put another establishment, just because it's Republican is not the right thing. Remember, Republicans and Democrats are dead. It's establishment versus Tea Party. Vote Roy Moore, Judge Roy Moore. Vote for him, Alabama, and put him in the Senate where he can do some good. Maybe if we get one more good, strong Tea Party in there, maybe we can replace or repeal Obamacare. Well, that's about all I wanted to talk about this week. It was a big, eventful week, but we got it. We got most of the big events chronicled for the week. So in the future, we can always look back and we can look at the date and say, I wonder what happened this week in politics.